Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life Podcast, the podcast for women who want to live fully embodied, nervous system regulated, open-hearted, radiant, and alive. Here we explore the practices, modalities, and lived rhythms that return you to yourself, to your heart, to your body, your intuition, and your divine spark. This podcast is for women who are ready to awaken their inner creatrix, activate their inner manifester, and remember, an ecstatic life isn't a destination. It's the path we're walking together. Hello, and welcome back to the Ecstatic Life Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Goff, and today I am here doing a solo recording, and I would like to talk about one of my most favorite subjects in the whole world, and that is ecstatic dance. And it's funny because I don't think I've actually done a full episode on ecstatic dance since I started this podcast a year and a half ago. We're about halfway through season 2, and I have talked a lot about ecstatic dance, but I don't think I have done a full episode specifically dedicated to ecstatic dance, which is funny because ecstatic life was actually born from ecstatic dance. And I will get into that story a little bit later into this podcast. But suffice it to say, for it being so important to this show, to my work that I do, my coaching business is Ecstatic Life. My blog is Ecstatic Life. I just launched the Ecstatic Life Academy. I don't think I've actually dedicated a full episode to the story of dance, the story of ecstatic dance, why it is so important to me. I know I have mentioned the story of the inspiration, the download I got, like why I named my everything Ecstatic Life, but I don't think I've really done an entire episode just dedicated to this subject. So here we are, a year and a half in, and it's a long time coming, and so let's jump into it. Dance has always been super important to me. So ecstatic dance has only been in my life for a couple of years, but dance itself has always been a huge part of my life ever since I was a kid. And I did dance lessons, but that wasn't really necessarily where my passion was. My passion was in the free form expression of dance. And now my mom has always loved to dance. My Nana, her mother, has always loved to dance. My Nana who lives, oh, you can't see it in the shot, but my Nana who lives here in my office, she's my guardian angel. She was a big dancer, and she was very much into ballroom dance, couples dance, going out and dancing. And my mom as well, much more into going to rock concerts and things like that, but very much into dancing. And generally in the setting with other people at concerts, at shows, things like this. And so I grew up with that. But not only that, just the expression of it, even as a child, the expression, I was always creating choreography for, little shows. I was homeschooled, and me and my friends would make shows and put them on for our other friends, our parents, or things like that. And so using my body in that way for expression was always very important to me. And I always had a love of dance. I can never remember not being ecstatic about dancing, not having that connection in that way. And even after I experienced the sexual trauma, even after I went really, disconnected from my body, I got very disembodied, and I was doing a lot of things to escape myself, to escape my body. It felt very uncomfortable to be present with myself. So I became very disembodied. But even during that time, even when I was really in the depths of my trauma, experiencing a lot of PTSD, a lot of dissociation, I still could find that solace, that passion, that aliveness, that embodiment, that connection to self through dance. And at that time, as a teenager, I actually got a fake ID and I started going to clubs and bars to go dancing. And while on the surface and while I would have made this judgment on myself at the time, it just seemed like this was just like a fun thing to do, go out and party and dance. And, I could paint it in that way. But now, knowing what I know about somatic work, knowing what I know about the way that we process trauma, I realize looking back that that was a form, that was a way that I could get back into my body. That was a way that I could reconnect with myself. That was a way that I could feel alive again, feel, connected to spirit, connected to self. And, it was embodiment. It was the opposite of the escapism that I was, spending the majority of my time trying to participate in. This was actually doing something that brought me back home to myself. And I felt so good in those moments, so alive in those moments. When I would be out dancing, I wasn't having panic attacks. I wasn't feeling anxiety. I was feeling safe in my body. I was feeling alive in my body. I was feeling full of eros, the life force energy running through me, creative energy, sexual energy. And I didn't feel the shame and the burden that I felt most of the time. So even when I was at my lowest with my trauma, I was still able to connect to myself through dance. And later on, that moved from just dancing at clubs or bars or concerts to actually taking dance lessons. I did contra dancing for a lot of years. I did swing dancing. So I started doing these, couples dances, these more structured dances that also gave me that same high, that same, ecstatic feeling. And this added this other element, this element of structure and this element of safety, because let's face it, a lot of times when you're dancing at bars or clubs, there is a slight element of unsafety in those situations. And while it never swayed me, I was going out on a regular basis to go dance. There were some times where I got into situations that were not safe because of the location, because of the drinking, because of the atmosphere, the culture of that sort of dancing. Versus in my early 20s when I started doing swing and then got into contra, that was a very safe container, a sober container that I could fully embody that passion, that aliveness, but without it being misconstrued, without it having this dangerous element that it did when I was younger and just going out to bars and clubs. And back then, during that time when I was still actively in the PTSD, I could not access the feelings of connection, the feelings of peace that dance brought me through stillness. So I now have a regular daily meditative practice, which is very enjoyable for me. And, it's one of the highlights of my day, the peace that it brings me, the stillness. I love it now. But at that time, my nervous system was so dysregulated that I couldn't access that kind of peace through stillness. And so what I didn't realize at the time was that I was actually engaging in a somatic practice, in a healing practice through that dance. And that was giving me that connection to source, the connection to self, the connection to my body that I wasn't able to access through something like a meditative practice. In fact, a meditative practice back then, because I had started getting into yoga back then, and I found it painful to sit still in meditation. I had gone to a local temple to try some meditation, and it was very difficult. I would sit through it. It was a very forced, difficult, painful feeling to sit still with myself for that long. And I do realize that now that I have regulated my nervous system and I am able to sit in stillness in that way, that same channel that is opened up, that connection to the divine, that connection to the self, is opened up through these still practices as well. It's not necessarily that I was so disconnected, so disassociated that I couldn't connect with my higher self or couldn't connect with my inner self or with God, but that I could only access it through that movement that got me out of my head. The meditative practice got me too much in my head, and that was such an uncomfortable place to be. And so through these somatic practices that I was unknowingly engaging in, I was able to make that connection by bypassing that mental chatter and turmoil, that, mental processes. But, back then we did not have words for that, not that I was aware of, not in layman's circles. It wasn't, nobody was talking about somatics, nobody was talking about somatic healing, somatic work. Nobody had that language back then. This was not something that was in my awareness in any way. I know I had heard of dance therapy. I knew that yoga really brought me that same sense of peace. And yoga was one of the first practices that I really connected with on my healing journey. But I definitely didn't have the language for why I felt so passionate, so alive, so connected, so, just not feeling traumatized when I was dancing. I didn't know why I could put on a CD and dance in my kitchen while I was making dinner, and that being alone and moving my body in certain ways could bring up so much emotion, could feel so moving. But it did, and the important thing was that I kept following that. I kept engaging with it. I kept following that passion. I kept moving my body, and unbeknownst to me, I was facilitating healing each time I did. So, fast forward a couple of years ago, I was really deep in my healing journey. I was really starting to do the work on a really serious level. 3 years ago, I decided that was it, and to completely change my life. I had hit a burnout point of overgiving. I was aware of my trauma and working on it, but I realized my victimhood consciousness, my victimhood mentality in reliving my trauma over and over and over again and bringing that forward into current relationships, especially my partnership, and martyring myself. And I became aware of this victim consciousness and decided to take radical responsibility for my situation in life and just start doing massive, massive work to completely change and heal. And it was sometime about maybe 9 months or a year into that journey that for some reason, I had been studying a lot of different modalities at that point, doing a lot of nervous system healing, getting into meditation, really, diving into all these different healing modalities to see what worked for me, what moved the needle the most, and practicing different things every single day. And ecstatic dance popped into my head. And I don't know why. I don't know that this was something that I was aware of. At that point, I was starting to have a lot of downloads. My connection with Source, God, had really opened up. And so sometimes things would just pop into my head. I know now from having, studied these metaphysical principles, studied manifestation, started to really develop myself spiritually. I understand now that that is our natural open source ability, our intuition, our connection to God, source, whatever energy that we can turn on and open up to. But I would get pings, just little things would pop into my head back then before I really understood how to open that channel up, because that channel was starting to open up, naturally through the work I was doing. And so ecstatic dance just popped into my head, and I'm like, that's interesting. Maybe that's something that I should do. And I had started Googling it. Is there an ecstatic dance near me? Well, exactly 1 week after ecstatic dance popped into my head, I happened to be at a birthday party, at a kid's birthday party. And the woman that was hosting the party for my good friend's daughter had this big dance barn. And she was having a kids' dance there. And she happened to mention that she hosts ecstatic dances there. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting, because for some reason, ecstatic dance just this past week popped into my head as something that I need to look into. And she's like, well, we happen to be having an ecstatic dance next weekend. And so the way things line up, and again, now that I've studied this, now that I understand the laws of the universe, I can see how these puzzle pieces fit together. And this was a meant to be situation, right? I was following those intuitive hits. I was following those nudges, and I was open. I was open to receive the messages. So I went to that dance, and it was like a religious experience. I felt like I came home. And when I came into the ecstatic dance, I wasn't really quite, I wasn't sure what to expect. But at the end of it, it was like a remembrance. And we sat in circle afterwards and did heart shares, which is, one of the main components of ecstatic dance. And I said to the group of people I had been dancing with that night that I felt like I came home. And it was a remembrance. And it synthesized all of the beautiful experiences, beautiful feelings I had had through dance throughout my life. And it brought it into this container that was so healing and nurturing and set up in a way to really guide a transformative experience should you be open to that. And so right then I became addicted. I just fell in love with it, and I had to have more. And so I found more dances, and I began going regularly. And a lot of times the ecstatic dances would happen on a Sunday evening, and so I would call it my church. And really that's how it felt. It felt like a religious experience for me. And so to the story of the birth of Ecstatic Life, early on in one of the ecstatic dances that I had gone to, I had been planning to launch a podcast, launch a blog, launch a coaching business, launch my website. I've been working on the back end of all of that. And my branding was Holistic Life. And, the Holistic Life podcast, the Holistic Life blog, Holistic Life coach. And I was in an ecstatic dance, and I got one of those, downloads, as they call them, one of those, beaming in messages from God in my head that said, if you want to be successful, you have to be ecstatic about life. You have to be ecstatic life. Holistic is played out. You need to be ecstatic. And it was such a clear message. And I was like, okay, I hear you. And so I went back the next day and I rebranded everything to Ecstatic Life. And so really it was so fitting too, because holistic is a huge part of what I do. And it's not to say that I am not holistic, But it's even more than that, right? I mean, I do believe it's, you have to have everything in balance and coming into play. You can't just focus on your physical health or your mental health or your emotional health or your spiritual health. You really do have to have a holistic view. And that's truly how I feel about health and wellness in general. But ecstatic. Someone said recently on a podcast recording, she's like, "Oh, ecstatic life just fits you so well. Ecstatic, that's your word, like it exudes from you." And I had grown up all my life being told not the word ecstatic, but you smile all the time, you're always happy, you're always one of those cup half full people. So really that word resonated very deeply with me. And as I studied, well, what does ecstatic actually mean? It's not just this joyful exuberance. Ecstatic has a deeply spiritual meaning. And so the other half of that is actually referencing that connection to God, source, energy, the universe, whatever you want to call it. Ecstatic is acknowledging a transcendental experience. And I have come to feel that that is one of the most important aspects of my life now as well. And that is one of the most important aspects of ecstatic dance. So there is the joy that it brings. There is the healing. There is the connection to source. There is also deep darkness or sadness or grief that can come up. So ecstatic is not about being in joy all the time. It's about truly deeply being with your experience and feeling what you feel. Because sometimes during these ecstatic dances, I would move, maybe, moving some stuck energy that was in my hips or something, and waves of grief would come up. I danced out shame and repression and jealousy. I danced with my jealousy a lot. There were all kinds of more uncomfortable, darker emotions, feelings, that I had to work through as well. So it wasn't just all about joy and exuberance, but about deeply feeling and deeply connecting with my true self and my higher self and my body. So while I am cup half full, smiling all the time, happy person in general, this isn't about a fake it till you make it or high vibes only or any of that bullshit. This is about truly being authentic and being present. So I found ecstatic dance at that turning point in my life, at that exact moment that I needed it for an even bigger breakthrough. And honestly, it felt like, again, with the synchronicity, again, with the listening to the calling, it felt like a meant to be thing. Because not only was it another modality that just catapulted my growth during this period of, huge, this quantum leap that I was going through, but it also inspired me so much in the work that I'm doing with other people in following my soul's calling. I know now that I am here to teach this to others. I am here to facilitate for others. I am here to help others heal their trauma and reconnect with their bodies. And this tool, ecstatic dance, is such a powerful tool in that. And so now I've actually become an ecstatic dance facilitator. I am hosting dances regularly now after a couple of years of attending and having this really burning desire after a little while to be in the leadership position with that. I last year did a women's only ecstatic dance during a retreat that I hosted. That was the first one that I did, and it was with a live DJ, and we were outside around a fire, and it was really beautiful. And the second one I hosted was a kids dance, a kids ecstatic dance, which was also really beautiful and really amazing. And my kids love going to the dances with me, especially my eldest, or my second eldest, my 11-year-old. She's got that same passion for dance that me, my mom, and my Nana all have. And so, yeah, she really gets into it. Anytime I take her to like a music festival or anywhere that there's live music playing, she dances her heart out. And so I've been able to bring her to some of the ecstatic dances. And yeah, she truly loves it. So watching the kids get into it has been really neat also. But since then, I've now started every third Sunday in downtown Gainesville. I am facilitating an ecstatic dance. This one is an adult 21 and up one. And, to touch on that actually, like why would some be adult and why would some be kid friendly? Because dance, as I was hinting at earlier, talking about, the passion and the eros and, the sexual energy that moves through you, dance is a sensual activity. And a lot of us have not only sexual trauma, but sexual repression, sexual confusion, distortion, all kinds of things tied up in our sexuality. And we have had years of programming that on one hand, our sexuality is bad and shameful. And then on the other hand, we live in this culture where everything is over-sexualized. And it's very confusing. And you can see, a lot of people are super confused about what sex is, and pornography and, the rampant industry around that has really made things even more confusing. And so we are more and more and more disconnected from our bodies, and at the same time, and it's on a physical level. We're talking about the hormones that are in the water. We're talking about the plastics, the phytochemicals that are hormone mimicking that are messing up our endocrine systems. We're also talking about, the food. Honestly, most of us aren't getting good nutrition. So on a physical level, our hormones are being very disrupted. And the screen addictions, the porn addictions, there are so many levels of this. The unhealthy communication, most of us are not taught empathetic, healthy communication styles. I could go on and on and on. Just look at Hollywood and all of everything that's coming out around, the Epstein stuff, and basically all the grooming and, all of the brainwashing that goes into Hollywood. So we are, suffice it to say, just super screwed up on this level. And, it's more than half of women are sexually assaulted in their life, and it just goes on and on and on. And so a lot of us really have a lot to work through in that arena. And so actually ecstatic dance, in being able to express yourself in that sensual way through sensual movements, through the thrusting of hips, twerking, and this is, by yourself. This isn't like a club where you're like twerking and grinding on someone else. Like, this is not that kind of experience. And, maybe this is a good time to really explain the ecstatic dance experience and what it actually is. But just to say that this is a safe space to express and to work through a lot of that. And in moving the hips and being able to move that sexual repression or that sexual trauma out of the body, I just know me personally, I've experienced a lot of release in that way. That grief and trauma, I could feel it moving out of my body through the movements that I was making. So what is ecstatic dance? I will explain what happens in an ecstatic dance. So you start in circle. It is a 90-minute playlist, first off, that is designed if you follow the 5 rhythms dance style, which I do. It takes you on a journey essentially through the 5 elements. And it is designed in a way to have an arc. So you start out slow and fluid, you move up into chaos, into really letting go, like full release. And then you slowly move back down into stillness again. And at the beginning of the dance, there's a circle. Usually there is some sort of embodiment or connection practice that's done beforehand. A lot of time everybody holds hands and does an om. Sometimes there are releases in some way that are done. Breath work, I've done breath work in mine, vocal toning, sometimes, silly movements or whatever. Like something is done in an intentional way in this opening circle. Sometimes people share their names and something about themselves, but it's a time to connect. You come into circle, greeting and meeting those who are going to have this experience with you. And there's a ceremonial, ritual aspect to it. So an intention setting. And after that, you move into silence. So the tenets are 90 minutes. We don't speak. So no verbal communication. You can sing, laugh, whoop, holler, like you can use your voice in that way, but no verbal communication. No cell phones, no pictures are to be taken. So it really protects the space. No uninvited contact of any kind. Some people do dance with each other, but it's actually more rare. Most people are having their own internal experience, their own experience with themselves. Some people, there is a culture of what's called contact improv. So people doing a kind of dance that is almost meditative in the way that you connect with the other person. But generally, what you see is most people having an experience with themselves, diving deep into themselves and working through their own stuff. And while it's 90 minutes, a lot of times people don't dance for the whole time. There is generally an aspect of meditation that is involved where a lot of people start off meditative, do some yoga, some stretching, again, moving up into more activity. And then at the end, coming back down onto mats, onto the floor, back into, sometimes people just go into Shavasana and just, lay there and meditate for the last couple of songs. But there are usually spaces created. So the container that is created for an ecstatic dance is very intentional. And there are usually spaces that are, soft spaces, cozy spaces, calm spaces, quieter spaces where you can go off if you're having an intense emotional experience and go be by yourself and go, be able to comfort yourself. And I have had those experiences where, some deep grief, and I'm not even sure where it came from, what it was about, came up in a dance, and I just suddenly started crying, and I had to go off into one of the cozy corners by myself and cry it out. And I'm not even sure where that came from. It just, I was moving my body in a certain way, and then the next thing you know, something released. And so that's very common, and a lot of people experience that. And so this is intentionally built into these containers. And so after the dance is completed, after the 90-minute set, again, everybody comes back into circle. And the closing circle, again, it's ceremonial, it's intentional. And there are generally heart shares. So people will share what they experienced. And this, to me, is one of the most healing aspects of the whole thing, because you're witnessed in community with other people who are having their own experience, maybe a parallel experience. And to me, it can be deeply moving to witness and to be witnessed in that vulnerability. And so you might share, yeah, I had all of this shame come up and I was judging myself and I had to dance with that and hold myself through that. And so that can be super powerful and super healing in and of itself too. And it's hard not to feel like family with these people that you gather with on a, I probably do an ecstatic dance bi-weekly now. But, you're gathering with the same group of people a lot of times. And going through these experiences like this regularly with them, like you feel a deep connection and start to really develop this sense of community. I know our ecstatic dance community has now spilled over and they're doing other types of events, picnics every week and things like that. So it really, people from all different walks of life, people from all different backgrounds that I would maybe think like normally probably wouldn't come together in a lot of other ways, really bond because you're brought together in this experience. And I find that aspect of it really, really beautiful as well. And these aspects are part of what made me feel so drawn to becoming a facilitator, to be able to create that kind of a container, create that space. And with mine, I'm being very intentional that it is focused on healing. Dance is fun, ecstatic dance, it can be just, fun and exciting and happy and all those things I was talking about ecstatic can be. But for me to focus on that spiritual healing aspect is very important. So I am intentionally crafting all the dances that I do to create an experience. The next one I have coming up is going to be dancing with your shadow. And so that one, the experience is in recognizing and accepting and working with those shadow parts of us. And as part of this, I'm curating the playlist to really elicit specific emotions and specific states. And there's going to be an element, our cozy corner is going to be a rage room style corner, or maybe we'll have a cozy corner and a rage room corner, but pool noodles and pillows that you can hit and just, a cathartic release area, which I'm imagining, and everybody I've spoken to about it is also agreeing with me, is going to be a very powerful experience combined with the ecstatic dance. I have also started doing an online ecstatic dance, it's like a mini dance. So it's a 30-minute experience on Friday mornings on Zoom. And I wasn't sure how that was going to translate, if, the experience would be the same online as it is in person. But really, I've had good feedback and I personally have felt very moved by it. So it does translate. So here's your official invitation. If you're listening to this, I'll put a link in the show notes to join my Ecstatic Life Academy if you want to give it a try. And also, if you're in the Gainesville area, I'm going to be actually bringing a second monthly dance out to Melrose as well. So Gainesville on the third Sunday and Melrose will be, I believe, the second Sunday. We're still working on dates for that, but starting in July. So your official invitation to dance with me if you're in Florida in person or anywhere else via Zoom, and links for that will be in the show notes. And if you have any questions about ecstatic dance, somatic practices in general, please leave a comment. Please reach out. I'm available all over on social media at Nicole Desiree Goff. And I am so happy to talk about this because it is absolutely one of my most favorite subjects. And I love you all, and I will see you next time. Want to dance with me? Go deeper with me? Have me in your back pocket, literally? Join the Ecstatic Life Academy on the Go Collab app, link in show notes.